Hello, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, joined by my good buddy Scott Karasik once again this week to discuss our favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons. This week we'll be talking a little bit about the Falcons' loss to the Cleveland Browns in Week 12, as well as previewing their Week 13 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, as always, we will get to your mailbag questions at the end of the show. Helping us this week is Blake Murphy. He is our resident Cardinals expert. He will be helping us fill in the blanks on this Arizona team that somehow has got the best record, or do they still have the best record in football now?
Still have the best record, Aaron, and believe me, a lot of us are just as surprised and happy as you could be, basically.
Yeah. So welcome to the show, Blake, and I don't know, did you get the opportunity to watch any of that Falcons-Browns game?
I did get to see a little bit of the end of it. The biggest thing I saw that was a takeaway was it was just missed opportunities with the Falcons. They had the 3 picks of Hoyer, and it just was kind of didn't have the ability to put the game away late. Josh Gordon just kind of went and took the game over at the very end with that one catch, and that's always really tough when you have that opportunity, but it's just the little things that can get you.
Well, we will talk about one of those little things, none other than our fearless coach, Mike Smith. But I guess first, before we get into that Browns game, Scott, the Falcons made some moves since we did our last show. They signed linebacker James Anderson. They ended up activating Drew Davis from the PUP list, and they added Freddie Martino back to the practice squad. So, Scott, do you have any thoughts on any 3 of those moves?
I love the idea of, signing James Anderson if they want to actually use him next to Paul Warlow. Warlow's needed a really good coverage linebacker next to him so he can focus more on his run responsibilities. And Warlow's played a lot better the past couple weeks since the bye. I think he got an ass chewing by somebody. And he probably did. But, he's a second-year player, and it happens. Guys get ass chewings, guys come back and look a lot better. And I think that's what happened with Warlow. And he's looked like the Warlow of last year since the bye. I do think that running a lot more dime and not having a linebacker next to him and instead having a safety next to him has probably made him a little bit happier too, because he knows that the guy's not going to fail on his responsibility, which has been the case with Shembo and Bartu. So I do think that Anderson getting signed is with the thought that he can fill Sean Weatherspoon's role.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see Anderson get a look. Last year they kind of made some moves towards the end of the season. One comes off the first thought off of my head was when they added Sean Locklear, and he basically rode the bench for the last 4 games or so of the season. And they added Charles Godfrey at safety a couple of weeks ago, and now they've added Anderson when sort of the thought was, they'll pick up a cornerback or they'll pick up a running back or whatever to kind of replace Anton Smith or Robert Alford. So they end up getting a linebacker, which makes you think, okay, clearly they have an issue at linebacker, which I think you would have to be blind not to have seen this year. And so I would hope to see Anderson get some reps before the year is done, just kind of see what he has. And I agree with you. I think the dime has really helped Warlow because, Bartu has struggled with his assignments. Shimbo's still learning the position. He's shown a pretty good mental acuity considering that he never played inside linebacker before. But it's one of those situations where, you're sitting there trying to, when you're Warlow, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, is this guy going to hit his assignment? Is he going to hit his gap or whatnot? And so you're not really concentrating on what you're doing. And by bringing the safety like Dwight Lowry up in the box to basically be an extra linebacker, extra cornerback, kind of simplifies things for Warlow, as he can just concentrate on what he wants to do.
Why do you think I said, hey, I think it's a little bit mental with Warlow right now? Because he's probably trying to cover for somebody during the first part of the season. You still were trying to be. You were arguing with me. I was like,
well, I was arguing with you because I don't see him missing a lot of assignments. So I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think, yeah, it's probably a little. Obviously, he's played better, so something's happened. But it wasn't really because I thought he was struggling with the assignments. I thought he was just struggling with the sort of physical aspects of the game, getting off blocks, making tackles.
Well, he's improved his tackles quite a bit.
Yeah, that's true. I got a question for you about Freddie Martino. You're the one guy in the world that knows something about North Greenville football. So I guess the question I asked, assuming Martino's going to spend the rest of the year in a practice squad, probably get a futures contract at the year, do you think he has a good shot at making the roster next year, or do you think he's probably destined for another year on the practice squad?
It all depends on what they do with Harry Douglas. If they decide to keep Harry Douglas, that'll depend on the coaching staff, because I know you can't stand Harry Douglas.
Yeah.
But if they decide to keep Harry Douglas, you're going to see a very good chance that Martino ends up on the roster. You know, at least as a fifth receiver, sixth receiver in that Drew Davis role. After that, I don't know. I think he's got the ability to be a slot guy, long term.
I was just curious, Drew Davis is back on the roster. Whoop-de-doo. I guess it's fortunate because, he's a gunner now that Antoine Smith's out. So, but, if Mike Smith is gone, or should I say when Mike Smith is gone, I'm not sure if Drew Davis will have an advocate on the coaching staff anymore. So he's a restricted free agent after this year. So I think we might be seeing the last 5 games of Drew Davis as a Falcon coming up. So hope he makes the most of them.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right, let's talk about this Browns game, man. So positives, the one thing that stood out to me was Desmond Trufant did quite a bit of shadowing of Josh Gordon. I thought he did a pretty good job again for the second week in a row. So I'm glad that the Falcons finally took our advice by using Trufant as that shadow corner. Scott, did you see any other positive from the Browns game that you wanted to point out?
I mean, there were some, but not anything super great. I thought the offensive line, despite, allowing... On first glance of the game, you're like, man, the offensive line didn't look great. But I went back and watched the film, and every single pressure that the Browns got was some sort of overload blitz or protection failure of some sort. And you're just like, you know what? You can't really blame the offensive line as a whole for this. It's either on James Stone or on Matt Ryan for the protection failures. Like, that's really who it's on. And for the most part, the line did really well. There were probably like 5 or 6 plays where Ryan was really running for his life, but other than those, it's kind of tough. And on 50 plays, you're going to have 5 or 6 plays where you're running around behind the pocket. Let's just be honest here. Yeah. No line protects perfectly. It's the NFL. You're going against great run blockers, great pass blockers, great pass rushers, great run stuffers. Like, that's the NFL. I will say this. If Ryan Schrader is not starting at right tackle next year, I will be shocked. He has had a great four-game stretch as right tackle. He's had 1 sack allowed. He's allowed 6 hurries. He's allowed 1 hit on I don't even know how many pass blocks. I mean, let's put it this way. He was doing what I thought Lamar Holmes could have done in just a way better fashion.
Okay.
So he's the Falcons' best pass blocker by far.
That brings my next question. Assuming Schrader keeps this up, do you think Holmes has a shot of beating him in next offseason?
No.
Okay.
No, because Schrader has looked like a skinny version of Tyson Clabo the last few weeks. And I'm perfectly okay with that. That's what I've wanted him to be for years. or since the Falcons got him. I wanted him to step up and be that Tyson Clabo type who comes in, starts for 6 years, and earns his role in the NFL and is that gem. And that 2013 undrafted free agent class has looked really, really solid already, with Warlow starting Warlow's a friggin' captain, probably going to be a long-term starter. Ryan Schrader, right tackle, probably a long-term starter there. He's looked awesome in the last 4 weeks. He's got a real test this week with Calais Campbell and I forget who the other guy is across the line, and then they got Okafor. They've got a solid group of pass rushers on Arizona. I mean, he's looked good. I can't really say anything else. He's looked good. And Gabe Karimi might as well just be gone, or if he comes back next year, he's a guard, because he has no. I don't understand why they started Gabe Karimi for 2 games. I'm even more shocked at Mike Smith and how stupid he is for not playing Ryan Schrader.
Yeah, I think that's all Mike Tice. But if we're going to talk about this Browns game, and Blake, bear with us because I'm sure this is going to get pretty emotional. We got to talk about Mike Smith and that late game decision, or I guess lack thereof, with bad clock management, which is the second time this year where the Falcons have lost a game largely due to poor clock management. I think some blame deserves to be gone to the defense that has basically been a seed in the fourth quarter of the last 4 weeks. But yeah, let's talk about Mike Smith.
I'm gonna sound like Samuel Jackson here. Okay. I don't mind the timeout as much. I don't mind the because he did it in London, or not, yeah, he did it in London too, right before that screen pass. It's not completely on Mike Smith for both of those.
Okay.
Why don't you call a fucking run play?
Yeah.
There's my inner Samuel Jackson coming out.
Okay. Right.
Call a run play. Let the clock wind down. I mean, how hard is it to call a jumbo package, have Jonathan Babineau as the fullback for a play, and just run right behind him and to the left side, because the left side runs were working a little better than the right side runs during the game. Again, that goes back to self-evaluation. And Lord knows the staff can't do that. But have Jonathan Babineau line up at fullback and just plow forward and just gain 2 yards. Hell, hand it to Babineau for 2 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. Just call a friggin' run play. You get a first down there, you force them to call all 3 timeouts by getting a first down there.
Yeah.
Who in what right mind was it, oh, hey, let's throw a fade route to Devin Hester, the most brilliant play call in the world? I'd been like, oh, hey, let's throw a slant route to Julio. I would have been like, all right, I'm good. I'm good. We'll slant route from Julio. Let's do that.
Yeah. You're right. I think you can certainly get on Mike Smith for not letting the Browns use one of those timeouts. Right? No one. I don't think you can fault Mike Smith for wanting a clock stoppage in that instance, right before that third down. But make the Browns burn that timeout as opposed to you using yours. And then obviously, if you call a run play in that instance on third and 2 instead of throwing a pass, you're pretty much guaranteeing that they're going to burn another one of their timeouts, even if you don't get the first down. And if you do get the first down, which statistics suggest that you're probably, at least the Falcons have been much more successful running the ball on 3rd and 2 over the years and this year than they have been throwing the ball. You get them to burn another timeout. So it's one of those situations where it makes a difference, where instead of having 3 timeouts and 44 seconds to get down the field. Worst case scenario is, you make 2 different decisions, Mike Smith and Dirk Cutter. It's 44 seconds with 1 timeout. And that's a lot harder. Even though they are going against the Falcons defense, so it's not that hard, but it's a lot harder than 61 yards or whatever to get down in field goal range. But do you think, Scott, that Mike Smith should be fired over this gaffe? I mean, obviously we think Mike Smith should be fired, period. But do you think this gaffe sort of means, he should be out now?
The only thing that can save his job is a Super Bowl title.
So nothing can save his job. Okay. So obviously Mike Smith has not been known for his great management situations over the years. And obviously there's 2 recent examples where it's cost the Falcons, and I'm sure people can point out several other examples over the years where it's cost the Falcons. I guess the question I want to ask, Scott, is do you think if he was better at that, how much of a difference would it make? I guess that's the question.
Dude, where's Schwartz and
Atlanta. Hey, Blake, I think you got somebody near you.
Oh, yeah. Hold
Ixnay.
Hey,
on. Someone walk in and got some coffee.
yeah. Atlanta would at least be 7-4 if Mike Smith just wasn't an idiot.
Okay.
I mean that in the nicest way possible. He's an idiot. He screwed up time management on 2 different games, and he's completely just. Oh. If he would have played the right players on the right spots, just for a good bit of the games, there'd be no issues.
Okay. I want to ask Blake a question since he's been sitting there patiently for us. From an outsider's perspective, Blake, what are your sort of thoughts on Mike Smith and his job security in Atlanta?
Just looking at it from the outside, the biggest thing I can say is that I just don't see him keeping his job at all at this point. It's been a number of years that he's been there. He's been very long tenured there at the Falcons, and it's just one of those cases where it's best to kind of move on and change. I mean, the team has struggled with offensive line, defense has been bad for years, clock management. There's just been a lot of times where this is just a team that needs kind of a fresh start where it is, and the fact that they're even competing still in the NFC South is just a testament to kind of how bad the division is. It's just looking at where it is. Whenever you get down to clock management and the little details, and you continue to go over and over again with missing those details, it doesn't reflect well on you or the rest of your team or your ability to coach, frankly.
Okay. All right, Scott, unless you got some last thoughts on this Browns game, you want to get into this Cardinals preview?
Yeah, my only last thought is if Desmond Southward would have just turned around on that long Devin Hester field goal return, he would have blocked out Joel Bitonio easily. He would have at least slowed him down enough to where Devin Hester could have gotten around it. And we probably would have seen a SportsCenter top 10 highlight on that one play.
All right. So let's talk about the Cardinals. Blake, the Cardinals made a move today. They signed Michael Bush, the running back. What are your thoughts on that move, and do you think it'll be a boost to the running game? And why did they wait so long to add a running back?
I think part of the reason they waited so long was that they tried to make some moves, and they signed Marion Grice off the practice squad. But I think it was also just contract and other issues, and kind of timing can sometimes come into those. Ever since Jonathan Dwyer left, the Cardinals have been missing that sort of big, strong back that can kind of gain 2 yards on 3rd and 1. Stephon Taylor, while he's been decent in pass protection, has just been terrible. He's averaging like maybe I think it's like less than 2 yards per carry or so. And Andre Ellington, well, he's kind of been their stud and their speed threat. He's really slowed down over the last few games, down to like 2.3 yards per carry. They have faced some tough run defenses, but what they really need kind of is a big back who they can actually kind of pummel through and take some of the pressure off of him. So he's 30 years old, but be a boost. The biggest complaint a lot of Cardinals fans have had is that the top 10 pick Jonathan Cooper, who is like a top 10 pick for a guard, not to mention just taking a guard in the top 10, is still been sitting on the bench behind Ted Larson and Paul Faneka, who are two free agent ads who, quite frankly, have not played very well in the run game at all this season. So it seems like that adding the back might be a way that the Cardinals could improve the short run game. Just the question is how quickly Bush will get involved with the offense and if he'll be able to have an impact against the Falcons at all. He may only get a couple of carries.
I have 2 points. We know Ted Larson very well. Jonathan Babineau has routinely destroyed him over the years when he was a Buccaneer. And as for signing Bush, it must be nice to, be making moves at this point in the season, gearing up for a playoff run as opposed to what the Falcons are stuck doing. But it seems like, they probably picked up Bush not necessarily to do a whole lot short term, but try to get him up to speed so that by the time January they'll have a little bit better of a running game. Okay.
Yeah.
I had another question. Basically this season has been about if you've been struggling running the football, you play the Falcons, and all of a sudden your struggles go away. So are you pretty confident that the Cardinals will be following the footsteps of the Browns and the Vikings and whoever else basically has been able to run the ball down our throats this year?
Well, I think that they got a really good shot at it. Part of the thing was you take a look at the last few times they played the Falcons in 2012. They ran for 127 yards, and that was with Rod Stevens howling and, quite frankly, one of the worst offensive lines as far as pass protection in football. That was just like one of the biggest offensive things that they had that year with all those terrible quarterbacks. And then last year they had, I believe it was around 180 yards from Andre Ellington. It was just one of those things where they fixed the woes. And the Falcons, honestly, it doesn't seem like the defense has improved all that much. I think they've got a good shot to be able to do that. They've added Valdir in free agency, and they've got a good shot because the Arians is very much a keep trying it until it works, even if it kind of fails. So I think if there are going to be a lot of carries, if they'll be able to try to test the Falcons and see if they can give their offensive linemen a push.
I would love if the Falcons could do something like that, Like, keep trying a real running game, and then if it doesn't work, hey, it's okay. Just keep trying it until it does. Let's just not do it with Steven Jackson, because we all know he sucks.
Harsh words, but okay. So you talked a little bit about Jonathan Cooper. Is he not starting because it's like Bruce Arians is trying to send a message for him to work harder, or is it because maybe he's just not that good, or at least as good as we thought he was going to be?
A lot of people aren't really sure. The biggest thing that it seems to be is that he said that the best players are right now on the field, and that he has always been adamant in Larson and Faneka being the starters. He isn't even brought up the backup Cooper coming in at all. He did get a few snaps against Seattle, but the biggest thing that seems to be that Arians has a similar mindset to what Ken Wisenhunt did, where there's this kind of idea of the doghouse, where once a player can kind of get in the doghouse, if they don't play through injury or be strong to play through other pain, that they seem to kind of lose ground or a little bit of lack of trust in his eyes. He gave a lot of compliments to Andre Ellington playing through a torn tendon earlier this year. And it was kind of like vaulted him up, and it's like that's kind of his type of guy, is the kind of old school guy who'll play through pain. And when Cooper came back from his leg injury, he really struggled in pass protection. He looked hesitant running. I think that he kind of lost a little bit of favor in Arians' eyes. So we'll see if he gets a shot anytime in 2014, but I don't think you're going to see him until the the 2014 offseason get a good shot at seizing that left guard spot away from Ted Larson.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's interesting because Ted Larson is terrible, and so you would think that they would, even if Cooper wasn't working as hard, that just he could accidentally, be better than Ted Larson. So, yeah, it's interesting to see that. Other question, obviously you guys recently had a major injury to Carson Palmer, season ending, and Drew Stanton is now the starting quarterback. And Drew Stanton is a guy that I don't think a lot of people know too much about, but at least from my observation, the drop off between Palmer and Stanton I don't think is very big at all. But what are your sort of thoughts on the type of quarterback that Drew Stanton is, and do you think the Cardinals have a legitimate shot to make a deep run in the playoffs with Stanton at quarterback?
I think the biggest difference with Palmer and Stanton is that Palmer is much more precise in terms of his ball placement. He'll be able to kind of, if he's running a route out there, he'll be able to hit the route crisp, hit the receiver in motion. Stanton is going to have a big arm. He'll be able to throw deep, but and he's thrown like deep more than Russell Wilson has this year, despite only playing like 3 games. He'll test the secondaries deep. He's not afraid for that. But his ball placement and accuracy can get a little bit skittish at times, or off a bit, where receivers have to adjust. So that makes it kind of more pressure where they're not able to pick up maybe as many third downs as they did before. They have a few more 3-and-outs. There's just kind of a lot more pressure on the defense to have to perform and force turnovers. Just where Palmer was more of, I think you could say about 20 points a game or so. Stanton, maybe you're looking at somewhere around 14 or so that he'll be able to put up, and then they'll have to try to score points on defense or make a special teams play. So I think if they have home field advantage with how strong the University of Phoenix crowd is, they have a great chance to get through a deep playoff run. But if they have to go on the road at all, I think they're going to struggle, and I think that you could see like a one-and-done football team if they do have to go on the road to start the playoffs off.
So you're saying if they get the home field advantage even through the Super Bowl, because it is played at University of Phoenix, that it could be pretty fun.
Yeah, the coach has full confidence in him that they can go ahead and win the Super Bowl through Stanton. Their defense is playing just as lights out as they were last year at the end of last year. They might have been like maybe the second best team in football finishing up last season. I went and beat Seattle on the road, even though Palmer threw 4 picks in that game, which is just insane. So it could get really fun if it gets down and have that home field advantage all the way, but that's what the coaches set that standard before the season. The question is just, can you keep Stanton upright? He's been taking a lot of hits. He left with a concussion in the San Fran game, so if you can get to him and knock him out, and they have to go down to Logan Thomas, who's the 4th-round rookie project, then they don't have a shot at all.
I kind of like Logan Thomas, though.
Oh yeah, I like Logan too. Like, believe me, I'm like one of the bigger Logan believers. The thing is just he's not ready right now. He went in for the Denver game, and he did show off like the arm strength that he had, the velocity, but the thing that he doesn't have yet is what he needs more of is he needs time. He needs to learn more about the quarterback position. He needs just kind of time to learn the offense. Right now, he looks like a deer in the headlights. So, but anyways, if you're having to go down to a rookie quarterback for whatever reason, no matter how good your football team is, you're not very likely going to win a football game, not with a quarterback who's so young as he is and needs to mature.
Okay. So is there any update on Stanton's injury? I know he got knocked out of the game. Is he perfectly got a clean bill of health this week?
Yeah, they said that there was no issues for where it was. There was some minor taping of the ankle just in case, but he walked off the field fine, and there's no concerns. There's another big player on the Cardinals who is on the injury report list, and I don't think will play, is Larry Fitzgerald. He had a grade 2 MCL sprain, which normally can take up around 4 weeks or so, they said, normally to heal. And they said that before the game on Sunday versus the Seahawks, he wasn't even able to run. So I doubt he practiced at all this week, and I doubt that he suits up against the Falcons on Sunday, which could be a big help for Atlanta if they have to just go up against Floyd.
I once had a grade 2 MCL sprain. Well, they called it a tear, and I had to have surgery for it, and it was the same like 4-week recovery. He probably had to do an arthroscope. It's not fun at all, and he probably can't run for 2 weeks. So I don't think Atlanta's going to see him unless he's superhuman, and we are talking about Larry Fitzgerald here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he missed his first game in 110 games or something like that. Ridiculous for his streak was snapped with that. So it's not a good injury at all. I don't think that he's going to be back there. If he was able to go this week, then there's no reason he shouldn't have been able to go last week. So he's not going.
Okay. I think it's interesting because obviously, Michael Floyd is the guy that they kind of want to groom to be Fitz's future replacement. But this John Brown guy has been pretty good. And I think because the Falcons have sort of shadowed Trufant the last couple of weeks, I think it would be interesting. Like your automatic thought would be, oh, they'll put him on Floyd. But the Cardinals don't seem to throw the ball to Floyd that much. He's been targeted twice in the last 2 games. So I think it would be an interesting thing if the Falcons tried to put Trufant on John Brown to shadow him, and then sort of put Robert McClain, who tends to do a lot better against bigger receivers than fast receivers, against Floyd. I think that would be a much better matchup. Do you think, Blake, that Floyd, with Fitzgerald being out, and I think Arians said this week that they probably should have tried harder to get Floyd the ball a little bit more against Seattle. Do you think he'll see, sort of that number 1 receiver workload this week against the Falcons?
I think it's going to be I think it's going to probably be a lot more to Floyd, and part of the reason I think for that is because I think that teams now know about John Brown. I think they'll slide safety help over the top to make sure that they don't get beat deep. Trufant's been playing great this year, and I think that that's something where they could match him up against Brown and try to see if they can take him out of the game, because he is Drew Stanton's favorite target. Brown has caught, I want to say 3 touchdowns from passes from him already this year, which is the most of any other Cardinals wide receiver from Stanton. It would be an interesting thing because most of the teams that we've seen who played John Brown, because he lines up either in the slot, have just played a safety over the top for him deep or tried to do one-on-one on the sideline. He's made some great sideline catches, so it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. I think that you're going to see the Cardinals focus a lot more on getting the ball to Floyd, trying to get Stanton into a rhythm early, and trying to get the running game going in order to open up the play-action pass. That's what Arians' bread and butter is.
Okay. All right. Scott, what are your thoughts on Trufant shadowing Brown?
I think it'd probably be the best corner that Brown has seen all season. Because we all know that the Seahawks weren't putting Richard Sherman on him. We all know that the Broncos weren't putting Aqib Talib on them. We all know that, there's not really anybody on the Raiders or the Redskins or the Giants or the Chargers. There's you look around the different teams that he's played, there's not really any amazing corners outside of Aqib Talib and Richard Sherman that I would say are in the same kind of level that Desmond Trufant is on. Obviously, I think Sherman's a little bit higher. I think Talib's just a little bit lower. But that's that same range that Trufant's in. And they weren't matching him up with John Brown. Let's be honest here. They weren't putting, Richard Sherman on John Brown. And John Brown's the kind of guy that would have burned Richard Sherman anyway. Because Sherman's not a fast guy. He's a man-him-up coverage kind of guy. He's a let's run this short zone kind of guy. So, honestly, I think that it's more likely we see, what's his name, Robert McClain or Josh Wilson on him for a play or two, and then after he burns Atlanta for an 80-yard touchdown, then we see Trufant on him.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah, one of the reasons also why you would even put Trufant on John Brown is because Larry Fitzgerald's out of this game. If Fitzgerald, part of the reason Brown's been so effective is because Fitzgerald and Floyd have been able to take up underneath and a lot of vertical routes. So that's on the sidelines, especially for Floyd. They like throwing to him deep on the sidelines. So John Brown's had the middle of the field to be able to work with, and he's been able to burn a lot of safeties over there. The Eagles game especially, they had that big 71-yard touchdown. So if they do match up Trufant on him, it'll be something like he hasn't seen yet in the NFL, and he is just a rookie. He's had a couple of drops, and while he's played exceptionally well, that would be a big test for him if he had to go up against a corner like Trufant.
Well, let's put it this way. Trufant could probably keep up with Brown. He might let Brown get behind him, but it's one of those things that Brown gets behind him is because the quarterback had 7 seconds to just sit back there. And if a guy's sitting back there for 7 seconds, he's going to burn you anyway, as we saw with Tony Romo. Yeah, that's why Tony Romo's looked good the last few weeks. He's getting back there. He could sit back there all day if he wanted to.
Yeah, I thought Trufant did a really good job keeping pace with Josh Gordon last week. So if you can run with Josh Gordon, who runs like a 4.4 flat or whatever, 4.38 or something like that, I think he's got the speed to keep it with John Brown.
Well, yeah, and John Brown isn't the physical guy that Gordon is either. Brown's like 5'10", 180 pounds. No offense, Blake, but he's got the physicality of a Harry Douglas.
Oh yeah, no, he's the guy who he's not going to be able to push you off the line of scrimmage. He's going to try to slip past you. That's kind of the one thing where they try to see if they can find matchups where they like him against either a bigger, slower corner, like we're talking about, or especially against a safety coverage where he knows that he can just do a little hitch and go route, or especially the double move. He's been able to burn a lot of guys this year just because of that. So that's part of why I think the running game for the Cardinals will be important this game especially, is because if Stanton does have those 7 seconds, as you say, either because of play action or because of protection, then he will get time to throw down the field. So if the Falcons are able to stop the Cardinals from running the football effectively, and Stanton's going to have to drop back under pressure and fire, that's something where you could see a couple of picks from him. He did throw. He's thrown 3 interceptions in the last 2 games, so that's one thing you got to watch out about with the backup quarterback, is he's liable to throw one of those.
And with Atlanta's defense finally kind of playing the ball well, I know Aaron's not a huge fan of Kamal Ishmael, but Ishmael's shown a tendency to pick balls off in those intermediate zones, and Atlanta's using him to his strengths. I'll put it that way. With William Moore coming back, William Moore's shown that same kind of propensity. And he can even play a deep third if need be. Dwight Lowery's shown some ability to pick some passes off. He just hasn't caught any. Desmond Trufant learned how to catch the past 2 weeks and has 2 interceptions. I mean, it could be very possible that Stanton's the guy who has that Matt Ryan 6 interception game this week, if Atlanta can somehow stop the run. Which I would say, don't hold your breath.
I would say this about Ishmael. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Ishmael. I think he's a good 4th safety. I don't know if he's more than that. But when the few times when he has been in position to make a play in coverage, he makes a play in coverage. The issue with him is when he's in position. It's not as often as I would like to see. But he's a 7th round pick. He's a 2nd-year player. So I guess maybe I should lower my standards a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're expecting him to play like William Moore as a 7th round 2nd-year player when this is like his, 400th snap as an NFL football player, because he saw 0 last year. Yeah, 600. He's played 606 snaps. He's played 345 coverage snaps. He has seen less than 345 coverage snaps than William Moore saw his rookie year. Like, completely different kinds of situations. So I do think that you're a little tough on Ishmael. I understand why, but you're a little tough on him. But he's been playing pretty well for a 7th round, essentially rookie, who's being thrust into action, and then he's making plays on the ball. That's just, what more can you want from a kid?
That's fair. You know me, Mr. Negativity. But
what do you think the longest catch he allowed the last 3 weeks was?
The last 3 weeks?
Last 3 weeks. If you just had to guess off the top of your head.
20 yards, maybe?
17. He's doing his job in coverage. As a whole, the defense has been doing their job in coverage. There hasn't been any super huge reception outside of that, Josh Gordon one, which, come on, man, it's Josh Gordon.
What? We talked about the Falcons' corners matching up with Arizona's wide receivers. Let's talk about Arizona's corners, all the greatness of them that have been this season, matching up with the Falcons' receivers. Do you think, Blake, that we will finally get to see the Julio Jones versus Patrick Peterson matchup that we've all been waiting for since they played at Alabama and LSU?
I really hope so because Peterson right now has been playing exceptional the last few games. He had a very rocky start to the season where he had multiple pass interference penalties. I had 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was either 1 or 2 touchdowns he gave up versus the Giants, and he ended up coming alive afterwards. And he said that it was due to an ankle sprain where he really wasn't healthy during that stretch. And he said that he's finally gotten into his stride, and I have noticed some improvements in this game. So he basically held Calvin Johnson to around 50 yards, and then he erased Des Bryant from the Cowboys game, which, of course, Brandon Weeden did a fair share of that as well. But he and Cromartie are both playing at a very high level right now, and that's what gives Arizona a really good shot is because then they can move their other defensive backs, Tyrann Mathieu or Deion Buchanan, who's been kind of their Darrell Washington replacement this year. They've been able to move them around in coverage, to blitz, to drop back. Buchanan was the quarterback spy last week for Wilson, so and it gives them a lot of versatility on the back end. And it's not surprising to see Arizona with 6 DBs on the field a lot of the time.
Yeah. That's one thing I was noticing. They had a lot of 6 DB sets, and I was like, wow, Atlanta could do a lot of this defense next year, and it would not shock me. And it would look a lot better than what they're running.
Well, anything would look better than what they're running right now. So
that's very true. Very true. I'm not disagreeing with you there.
What do you think? What has gotten into Cromartie? Because basically, they're pretty much asking him to do the same thing that he was doing in Rex Ryan's defense, which is just play press man. But is it because he has Peterson playing opposite him? It's a lot easier to do that than who was it last year, Darren Walls or whoever the heck it was. What do you think has caused his sort of resurgence back to the good Antonio Cromartie?
Oh, I think there's 2 reasons, and the first reason is health. Last year he struggled a lot with a bad hamstring, and there was some concern about if he'd be able to recover from that well and stay healthy, and he's been very healthy throughout for a few weeks. And the second reason, I think, is money. He is on a very, very cheap deal with Arizona, very similar to what Carlos Dansby was last year, and it's kind of one of those 1-year vet minimum deals that really can motivate a lot of players who have the talent to step up their game to another level to get their payday. And Cromartie's 30, he's got like 1 big payday left in him, and he's trying to push for that. So it'll be interesting to see how it looks at the end of the season if other teams look at him. I do agree with you when you're saying that with the Jets, having Peterson across him has certainly helped him because he doesn't have to shadow the number 1 receiver throughout the entire game. Peterson's kind of there to help him out, and he hasn't been targeted as much as because of that. At least teams are having to kind of try to test Arizona through other different ways, at least, rather than try to throw outside of the corner. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. They've stayed on their one side, so I'm not sure if it's going to be more Roddy or more Julio. My guess is that it's going to be a mixture, and both guys will be covering either of them. So it's going to be a fun matchup this week to see. Those great corners go at it with those wideouts.
Yeah. Roddy usually lines up on the right side of the offense and Julio the left, so whoever's the left corner will probably get Roddy more.
Yeah, okay, the left corner would definitely be Cromartie. Peterson's usually been the right cornerback. So it's going to probably be the old one versus the young one, it looks like.
All right, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. All right.
Cromartie's having a hell of a year right now, too.
Yep. Okay, so we know that the Cardinals' secondary is great, and front 7 certainly hasn't been as good as it probably would be because of injuries like Dockett and Darrell Washington and that, but they still do have Calais Campbell in that front 7, and the last time he played the Falcons last year, he just absolutely dominated their offensive line. Can Calais Campbell be blocked?
Right now, the way he's playing, if he gets a good matchup against either the left tackler or the guard, he has just been dominating teams. He had 3 sacks last week versus Seattle, and ever since the injury in the Broncos game that sat him out for a couple of weeks, he has just come back and he's playing like his hair is on fire. The biggest thing about Arizona that's been crazy, and that's kind of a testament to Todd Bowles as the defensive coordinator, is they've only had 2 players who were starters at the end of last year in their front 7 that are still there. And they had the number 1 run defense last year, and so far they're number 3 in the NFL. And it's crazy to see that they're, despite losing Dockett, despite losing the other players, they've been able to find like guys like Tommy Kelly. They've been able to find another strong player in Alex Okafor, who's been able to come back from last year. They even had Josh Morrow, just a free agent random pickup off the street, fill in for Ed Stinson, who had stolen a starting spot. So they've just really had a very next man up mentality that's kind of become a bit of a cliche for the team. But it's been effective, it's been working, they've been disciplined and strong. So I think when you're looking at their front seven, it is a daunting task to take them on. So it'll be really interesting just to see, because Atlanta's had some struggles here, but if their right tackle has come on really well, that might be one way that'll be a big battle, is Alex Okafor, because he's come on a lot as a pass rusher for them in the last few weeks and gave them a big boost at the outside linebacking position, taking over for John Abraham.
Okafor was a guy who I actually compared to John Abraham coming out of college, and it's nice to see him come on like this. I was wondering where he was the first year and a half, but I guess I was talking to Church, and Church was telling me that Sean Church from Revenge of the Birds?
Yeah, that's him, yeah.
He was telling me that, Okafor's just been injured, had a torn pectoral muscle, had some issues, which would make sense. But I do think that Schrader versus Okafor is a matchup that could be fun. I think Campbell versus a now healthy Jake Matthews could be fun, because Matthews played his best game of the season this past week. Finally, he did have a couple blitzes come around the edge, but when he's sitting there taking on Desmond Bryant and they blitz Mingo around the edge, is that really on Jake Matthews? So I'm gonna enjoy seeing Matthews versus Campbell. I think that's gonna be a fun matchup. I think that's gonna be a bad one for Matthews, but I do think that if he steps up and shows his mettle, it'll be fun. It'll be good for him. And then Aaron, they're starting the likes of Josh Morrow, who multiple scouts told me was garbage at right end, and yet they've got a great defense. And you're saying you don't want Todd Bowles?
Well, maybe Blake can shed some light on the greatness of Todd Bowles and why he's so successful, and maybe why he'd be a good head coach.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing I can say about Todd Bowles is he's not your flashy out there he's not going to be like your typical grad rock kind of coach. He's very much more quiet and reserved, but what he's managed to do with the Cardinals defense is he's given them not only just confidence where it is, but he's taught them discipline in a way where they can plug a player in right away and all the players know what's going on, they know what's going to happen, they have commitment to the scheme where they're so very, very disciplined in the run game. He's been able to manufacture a pass rush. The team, for whatever reason, had, I think it was like second lowest in the league, like 3 or 4 sacks about the first few weeks. And they were just completely depleted the position, but they were still getting quarterback pressure and forcing turnovers. What he's managed to do, at least, is really been able to use just scheme and manufacture pressure. So it's very hard for me to see him go after the season, because at some point you assume that he's going to be up for a head coaching job. But he's deserved it because what he's managed to do is confuse quarterbacks like Phillip Rivers and Andrew Luck by bringing pressure from multiple places. Last week they lined up Antonio Cromartie as a linebacker. I believe it was during the Lions, and he actually rushed the passer in one instance. So he's able to use a lot of the pieces that they have on the defense and plug in guys into the offense and be able to rush the passer. So that's one reason that I actually looked at him, and he's been in a stable position with the team where he just got a pay raise. They just gave him kind of a security there in case no jobs open up. But he's not going to go to the Raiders. He'd go to a team that would probably more likely be ready to compete, would have at least the pieces on offense he could find an offensive coordinator for, and he'd be able to work together in defense. So Falcons are probably one of the top teams, I would say, when Mike Smith gets fired, that he could go to. Because he'd be able to take whatever the pieces they've cobbled together and he'd be able to make it work. He's shown that in the past before. And it's
so what you're saying is he would take the pieces that they have, he'd put them in the right roles, they'd know what their role is, they'd know what the scheme is, there wouldn't be a question, they'd have an identity, Aaron, used your favorite word, they'd have an identity on defense of, probably a 3-man front. And, maybe Malachi Goodman could be, maybe not Darnell Dockett or Calais Campbell, but he could be like better than Josh Morrow at least.
Yeah,
Jonathan
absolutely.
Pasco could have some fun, Paul Soliai could be useful. He may not be Dan Williams anymore, but he could at least be a solid nose tackle. I still say cut Tyson Jackson because screw him. And then Jonathan Massaquoi could be fun. He could actually get some pressure on the quarterback for once. I think Massaquoi is better than Alex Okafor right now. He's more seasoned. He's a better pass rusher, more moves. He's got a better bend around the edge. So, I don't know. I want Bowles in Atlanta next year. The more I look at it, the more I realize he's probably the right coach. The only two questions that I have is who would he bring in as defensive coordinator? Who would he bring in as offensive coordinator?
Yeah, and that's something that I'm not really sure of right now. There is kind of a connection that Arians has where he believes that the head coaches that are there, and it's through like relationship where it's unselfish play. So in other words, it's about managing teams, and Bowles is very much in kind of the same mindset that he is. So you're basically going to be kind of getting almost like a defensive version of Bruce Arians, just without the dropping F-bombs during press conferences is basically what you're going to be getting. One thing, like it's a good example, you're talking about putting guys in the right place and the right roles. Deion Buchanan was their first-round draft pick this year, and he needed help in coverage, but he was kind of more of like a play-of-the-line strong safety. And so what they did was they used him as a linebacker hybrid. He's been playing like as a linebacker and has gotten a lot of snaps, and he's had a fantastic rookie year that people aren't talking about enough. So it's one of those things where Todd Bowles took kind of a piece that's there, took the talent that was given to him, found the right place for him on offense, and he's basically, Deion's been like able to hit guys when a lot of the weaknesses that people set up at Deion at least haven't really been exposed with it yet. So he's been burned a few times, but it just kind of shows the dedication that he has to just building your team around the talent and players that you have rather than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So
he would take Rashid Hageman and put him in the right spot to make some plays. He would take Warlow and put him in the right spot to make plays. He would take Aaron's favorite player, Kamal Ishmael, and put him in the right spot to make plays on the ball. That's what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. What he's been able to do is they're able to force a lot of turnovers. I mean, if you look at what they did throughout the first few years, their scheme has been so good at quarterbacks being able to not diagnose either where pressure's coming from, where it's blitzing. That was one thing that we saw last year in the game versus Matt Ryan. He threw 3 out of his 4 picks with 5 or more players that were rushing the passer. So Bowles is able to blitz guys like crazy, like send 5, 6 guys and still hold up coverage in the back end. So that's one thing where they don't get a lot of defensive penalties either, outside of maybe a few pass interference calls. But it's just a very disciplined, strong unit. The identity is strongly in the defense. And I think it would be a great hire for Atlanta if he goes there. I do think that's the right fit. Selfishly, I want to keep Todd Bowles next year, bring back Carson Palmer and all the other guys, and see what they can do with like a pass rusher across from Alex Okafor. But I'm not going to think that he's going to come back here. I think he's too good, and I think that a team's going to snap him up. Falcons fans should hope that he's the one that they get.
Okay. I have two thoughts on Todd Bowles. One, I'll be pro Todd Bowles if he brings Bruce Arians' offense or a version of Bruce Arians' offense to Atlanta because I love that offense. But I'm a little skeptical of Todd Bowles just for one reason. I think a lot of his success this year has to do with the fact that he has 6 really good defensive backs. He has Cromartie and Peterson obviously are talented. Buchanan's another first-round pick. Matthew is obviously a player that probably would have been a first-round pick if he hadn't had the off-field issues. Rashad Johnson is an excellent center fielder, and somehow he's gotten Jared Powers to actually look like a quality cornerback for the first time in his career. So I think a lot of his success is because basically he can lead guys on islands and in the back end, and basically he can throw junk at offenses and kind of mix it up. And I think, obviously, he could bring that to Atlanta, but it would take a lot more than the Kamal Ishmaels of the world and the Robert McClains and the Josh Wilsons. And the Falcons would have to really kind of upgrade the players that they have on the back end. They already have 2 of them in Trufant and Alford, and maybe you could put William Moore in that center fielder role because he's certainly not going to be a man coverage guy. So I think maybe that would work, but I think it would take some time. What?
William Moore and that Deion Buchanan just flying around the field, hitting people, roaming, just destroying people role.
Okay,
I think
that's
that's
fair.
more William Moore.
Okay, okay, all right. Well, you got 3 of the 6 pieces. So what are the other 3?
Yeah, I think that's something where it is a good point. The one thing I'll say last year is that was the argument I saw a lot of people had with Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu, Powers is back there with how it was. People had looked at it and said that Arizona was having a lot of good defensive backs, and he had struggled with the defense that he took over, I should say, in Philly. Their defensive backs are just they're terrible. I mean, like you look in your toilet, probably find like some better defensive backs than what he had to work with that defense. But the big thing was after Matthew went down and Powers ended up kind of having to move over to take the slot, the defense still performed very well in pass coverage. And the bigger thing also that's there is he's managed to be able to get a front 7 of no-name guys and to be able to manufacture a pass rush and have a number 3 ranked NFL defense. They haven't had a 100-yard rusher since I believe it was week 10 of last season. They stopped DeMarco Murray, broke his streak this year. The Seahawks, all of the 100 rusher teams, they haven't had any running backs go over 100 yards against them. So that's one thing where you want to look at it. It's not only just, I think, the play where it is of the front 7 that's been so strong because of the secondary, but you got to look at the fact that he's a former DB and he understands scheming and understands the different types of coverages that are in the backfield as well. So I think that I can stand for what I've seen at least. That I do agree though that you would probably not see nearly as what Arizona would be like. He's not going to replicate what Arizona's doing in Atlanta just next year. But if you look at where the Falcons run and pass defenses, then currently at least now it's turning around in the pass defense. But if he could get that front run defense figured out or at least improved to a point, you'd be able to see a suitable defense that would be able to actually stop guys from running the football to pair with your offense next season. So that would be what I'd say. So I think you could see at least a playoff run next year if Bowles comes in and is able to at least somewhat get close with Arizona's defense. The offensive coordinator is something I have no idea about, and that's something that I can't really say positive or negative because I don't know. But you guys have a quarterback that's there. It's just kind of getting the right pieces to fit, and then getting the right confidence. I think at this point too would help a whole lot. Getting that identity you're talking about, Aaron.
So, I mean, we're just asking him to improve the 32nd best pass defense and the 24th best run defense. That's all we're asking him to do.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, would it really be that tough for him to take them and make them, I don't know, average by playing the right guys in the right spots? And say you add a couple of really good pass rushers in the draft, I think the Falcons would be a lot better with Todd Bowles as the head coach. That's just my big thing. You got to add a couple pass rushers. That's the big thing. Give him a Shane Ray type piece up front. Give him, Massaquoi. Give him in the second round, I don't know, someone like Vic Beasley who falls. One of those really good pass rushers is falling to the second round. One of them is. It's just going to happen. And, it might even be Shane Ray who falls to the second, and Atlanta gets Randy Gregory and Shane Ray, which would be berserk to see, but I just want to see something like that happen.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm less skeptical than I was 24 hours ago, or 24 minutes ago, I guess. So, the Cardinals' offense likes to push the ball down the field. Do you think the Falcons can sort of take advantage of that? They're getting back William Moore this week. They haven't had him for eight games, I think. And he is one of the more opportunistic guys. So if Stanton's accuracy is a little scattershot, that leads to a couple of tip balls. I think William Moore has 7 or 8 career interceptions just off of tip passes. Do you think that could be something that swings in the Falcons' favors this week?
I think it's going to be really tough for that because Stanton overall has shown that if there's no pass rush that's getting on him, he'll have a little bit of accuracy issues. But if he's got time in the pocket, when he's tested deep, they'll trust Michael Floyd to kind of make the contested catch for where it is. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how that'll work with their deep game and how they push it down the field. Last week, Stanton really struggled a lot because he had pressure in his face constantly from Cliff Averill, who really was able to beat Bobby Massey with a speed rush. Massey hasn't really had a bad game all season. So if the Falcons are able to somehow generate pressure on Stanton, I think you could see some of those forced balls that are going there. But Arians overall has done a really good job of kind of taking that 9-touchdown, 14-interception Drew Stanton and making him into more of a guy who's not going to be great, but he's going to probably be able to get about maybe like 1.25 touchdowns to a 1 interception ratio or so. Still enough where he's more of a game manager. As long as the pieces around him are strong and solid, he'll be able to kind of manage the game, be able to will turn the ball over, can get a win. So that would be the biggest thing, is if you guys can get pressure on the quarterback for it is. He's had some trouble with when he's had interior, not as much interior pressure even, but when he's got an edge guy coming right at him from his back, then he's either forced the ball, had bad placement, or gotten rid of it too quickly.
Okay, so Jonathan Babineau, you're facing Ted Larson this week, so you have no excuse.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, right there. If Babineau can have his way with Larson, then Cardinals fans will be going berserk about why Jonathan Cooper's not in there, but Arians won't make a change probably either way.
Okay. Scott, you got any more questions, or you want to get in the mailbag?
I think we should get into the mailbag. I don't have any more questions.
Okay. We got a couple of mailbag questions. Our good friend Andrew Schauweiler has another long one. What do you guys think of signing DeMarco Murray if he makes it to free agency? I know, Scott, you have the Falcons drafting Melvin Gordon in your mock draft. Also, why don't we see the Falcons running faster and more no huddle? The team seems to get down the field pretty easy with it.
I mean, I would love to have Melvin Gordon on the Falcons. I think DeMarco Murray would be fun to sign, but whoever gets DeMarco Murray is going to way overpay for him. So I'm at a point where I'm tired of seeing the Atlanta Falcons sign an old, over-the-hill running back. I want to see a young guy. I want to see a franchise guy that you can pair with Matt Ryan. If it's, as much as I would dislike a Todd Gurley draft pick in the first round, I could see it happening based on just the logic behind the pick makes sense. They'd have to sign a lot of defensive ends and pass rushers for me to even consider it a good draft pick, but I could see them doing it. I'd rather see them take someone like Melvin Gordon in the second, Mike Davis in the third, because Mike Davis reminds me a lot of Michael Turner. They just need to take somebody who can be an every down power back, that short yardage, guy who can also run for 5 yards a clip. Alfred Morris, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need. They need a guy who can be like Alfred Morris and then move to a zone blocking scheme. Because you run a zone blocking scheme with Devontae Freeman and Antone Smith and your Alfred Morris clone, and you got your Jason Snelling clone in Jerome Smith. You might have a pretty decent backfield in those 4 guys. Running backs are a dime a dozen. It's really easy to find good running backs. Just ask the Saints. Pierre Thomas was an undrafted free agent. Kerry Robinson was an undrafted free agent. Almost all of their running backs are undrafted free agents. It's really pointless to get someone high and put him in. If anything, Atlanta might be better off drafting a left guard to replace Justin Blaylock in the second or the third round and having them sit behind Blaylock for a year before moving on. That might be a better fit than taking a running back and say Justin Blaylock gets hurt, you plug that guy in, he should be just as good right away. He's a left guard. Offensive linemen have a very small, especially interior offensive linemen, they have a very small learning curve. Because protection schemes don't really change that much from the pros, from college to the pros. Especially if you're a guard. It's guard the defensive tackle who's sitting right in front of you. And if you can't guard him, try and flip him into the center. Or try and flip him into the tackle if he's a 34 defensive end. But it doesn't make sense to sit there and act like drafting a guard would be too tough and having a guy there would be... a guy should be ready right from the rip as an offensive lineman to come in and play unless he's an outside tackle and he's got some project issues like footwork, hands, things like that. He's an inside guy, you can work on that as you're going. You can have ugly technique and still be effective on the inside if you're a big fat body with some quickness, which is why people get so pissed off at Peter Kahns because he has no functional strength. So yeah, I'm a big fan of taking somebody big in the early rounds, taking somebody at running back in the 5th and then like the 7th round. That's what they should do. As far as why we don't see enough no huddle, ask Dirk Cutter, because that's his call. I think they should run no huddle pretty much every play. I think they should do the. I don't understand why they're not doing the 2012 offense anymore, where it was you have 2 play calls before every single play. If you see 2 high safeties, you do the run play call. You see 1 high safety, you do the pass play call. That's it. It's that simple. 2 play calls every play. Let Matt Ryan dictate the play. Yeah, they might disguise their coverage and run a high safety, and then that high safety drops down. Whatever. No big deal. You'll see that all the time. You'll still have plays to take advantage of that. So, again, I don't understand why they're not running that offense. They've got the players that are smart enough to understand it. Like, Toilolo went to Stanford. Roddy White's been in the offense for years. Julio Jones has been in the offense for years. None of those guys in that offense is dumb. So just run the friggin' plays. Run the right offense. Let Matt Ryan have control of the offense. And stop making it the Dirk Cutter show and calling stupid plays like, hey, let's run a fade to Devin Hester down the side of the field. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, just as an ASU fan, we know about Dirk Cutter at least, and a lot of people, we're just not fans of the play calling because he would basically like be the kind of coach who would call like a screen pass on 3rd and 23. It's just like you're looking at like saying, well, this makes no sense. It's something where he overthinks a lot of times, where rather than just standing up and running it like straightforward on like 1st and 10, he'll like try to get fancy sometimes when he shouldn't, or it's just tough. Just from like a quick outsider's perspective on the Falcons, I totally agree. I think that a guard or offensive lineman, someone to keep Ryan upright and help with the run game would be an important thing, and then see about a pass rusher in the 2nd round. Otherwise, I would say just take like one of the better pass rushers available, because that's going to help your defense. And Todd Bowles has been able to kind of scheme stuff just from the Cardinals' perspective. Good pass rush is able to cover up for mistakes on the back end. If you're able to kind of move the quarterback off his spot, or if you're able to get kind of a pressure or quarterback hit, that kind of makes up for if a guy falls down in coverage or runs the wrong zone, I should say.
Oh, what I was saying is go pass rusher, then do pass rusher, then do the offensive line.
Oh, gotcha, yeah, okay. Yeah, it depends.
3 straight years of just linemen, or 2 straight years of just linemen in the top 3 rounds.
Yeah. I would say for signing DeMarco Murray, I would be against it. He's injury prone. He's made it so far through the season pretty healthy, but that just probably means he'll get hurt next year. He'll be Sam Baker of running backs. Plus, he's 27. He'll turn 27 in February, and I basically believe that you don't pay 27-year-old running backs at all. Like unless you're giving them like $1 million for like a 1-year deal or a 2-year, $3 million deal, don't pay 27-year-old running backs, because that's when they usually have passed their peak. Their peak is between 22 and 26. So I would be against signing DeMarco Murray. As for why the Falcons don't run no huddle, speculation here. I think it's because the Falcons are losing and the coaching staff are having a tighter grip on trying to resurrect, trying to get this team back on track or whatever. And so I think, because of that, Cutter's not as willing as he probably normally would have been to sort of let Matt Ryan do his own thing. So if that's my guess as to why they're not running more no huddle. But we've known for many, many, many years, pretty much the entirety of Matt Ryan's career, that this offense clicks a lot better when they're in no huddle. And we've always had this dilemma of when do we run it? Why don't we run it more? That's always been an issue with this team, whether it was Dirk Cutter or Mike Mularkey. And it only seemed to work in 2012, where we found that right formula for it. But that's my guess. I don't know. Okay, a box of cookies. He changed his username. Devontae Hughes asks, should the Falcons sign Sean Phillips?
For a veteran minimum for the last 5 weeks of the season and cut Troy Bierman? Sure.
I knew he was going to say that. Yeah, if it means Corey Bierman's gone, then sure, why not? But if he's just basically going to sign him and he's just going to sit on the bench for 5 weeks, no, that's pointless. If you're going to play him, then yeah, sign him.
I mean,
Yeah,
at this point, he'd be an improvement.
Okay. Blake, you had something to say? You
yeah, I
wanted
was
to
gonna
add?
say that was one of the things with Cardinals GM Steve Keim. This is something where the Cardinals kind of Keim and Arians are kind of a package deal so far as what they've gotten, and I don't know where it is with the Falcons with their general manager situation. If Dimitrov's gonna stay with the team or if he's gonna get let go, it seems like it's possible that he could after the season. But if that's the case, at least you want to try to find an aggressive GM who will be able to add players and take them on. If Sean Phillips can upgrade and be like better than the next man on your roster for your 53, then dang right you go out and get him and sign him. So if that's what they want to do, then I would say go for it. Yeah, be aggressive.
All right. Looks like we got one last one in. Cooper Allen asks, does Atlanta address its defensive or offensive line in the draft this year?
If you're
Um,
asking for me to choose on which side they do, I'm gonna say defensive first, offensive more in that mid rounds. Because healthy, Joe Hawley's a competent center. Their guards are very solid. Ryan Schrader has been a very big surprise, but a very big surprise in a good way. And then Jake Matthews, I mean, you spend a first-round pick on a left tackle and he has some struggles, it's going to happen. Most left tackles have some. It's just, it happens. Matthews has at least looked technically sound. He does have a couple of issues with footwork that I've noticed, which I think relates more to his ankle injury. But I think that when it comes to offensive line, you get a guy who can be depth at guard. You've got a good backup center in James Stone. You've got a really good backup group of tackles if Schrader ends up being a backup tackle, and you move Holmes, you keep Holmes at starting right tackle. Schrader is at least a good backup tackle on either side. I mean, Atlanta's got some talent on its offensive line. I could see a backup left tackle. I could see a backup offensive guard with like the future of replacing Justin Blaylock as that. But other than those two kind of spots, I don't really see a lot of need for offensive line this year. Defensive line, I think there's talent at defensive tackle. I think you've got Babineau. I think you've got Hageman. I think Hageman's got the potential to be something special and to be an explosive interior presence along the lines of a Darnell Dockett if he can finally Darnell Dockett with some length. If he can finally get some playing time and not be an idiot off the field. The only other thing that I think they really need on that defense that'll really set it apart is just some monster edge rushers. You add a couple monster edge rushers to that defense and you bring back Weatherspoon healthy as a coverage linebacker, I think you could have a great defense in Atlanta. I don't think they're as far away from a good defense as Aaron does. Aaron says, "Oh, there's only three parts of that six for the Todd Bowles six-man defensive backs." I think if you re-sign Lowery, there's one. There's your center fielder. I think you have more as like your Swiss Army knife. That's two. Alford, Trufant, that's four right there. Ishmael can play that, Tony Jefferson role. Tony Jefferson was an undrafted free agent, and he's looking really solid in that defense. I think Ishmael has played just as good, if not better, than Jefferson this year, as a ball hawk at least. I don't see why you can't keep these guys. Aaron's not saying get rid of him. Aaron's just saying he's the fourth best safety on the team, which I disagree with vehemently. But I think he's the second best safety on the team, but he's not a center fielder, and he plays the exact same role as William Moore. So you're not going to start him over William Moore.
What I'm saying about Ishmael is I think he should be the fourth best safety on the team. The fact that he's the second best, I think, speaks to the issues that the Falcons are having.
Well, he's making plays, though.
Yeah, okay. All right, sure.
I'm understanding. He's making plays. Just like Warlow had that head slap during the bye week, Ishmael kind of had that head slap during the bye week, and he's really turned his game up. Maybe playing against the Panthers and the Bucks helps out a little bit, but he looked better against the Browns too. So
okay, it's true. It's true. Yeah, I think to answer Cooper's question, Yeah, I think you can imagine a scenario where the Falcons don't add a single offensive lineman and could be okay. I don't think that's the case with their defensive line. I would like to see the Falcons supplement their offensive line. I'd like to see them get a swing tackle to sort of be a backup, be that Will Spitek sort of dude. Maybe someone like Michael Roos. I can dream. Add somebody that can sort of be developed as the heir apparent for Justin Blaylock because I think he's probably got one more year left and maybe have Stone and Gunn compete for that backup center spot behind Joe Hawley next year. I think the defensive line. I think you have a lot of players. I think you have a lot of rotational guys. But I look across the defensive line and I don't see anybody besides maybe Corey Peters that's a starter on a good defense, on a good front seven. Like I think everybody knows I'm a huge Babineau fan, but Scott and I have said it multiple times on the show. At this point in his career, he's a situational guy. He's a guy that plays 20, 30 snaps a game. He's not a starter anymore. I think Soliai is basically a situational player. That's what he was in Miami. He worked well there when he was only playing like 40% of the snaps. The exact same thing about Tyson Jackson. He was always their second best defensive end on that team. They had a revolving door of defensive ends. Glenn Dorsey, Rapatapito, Tuamui, whatever his name is, Mike DeVito. They were always better than him. And, Tyson Jackson is a guy that should only play 20, 25 snaps a game. I think Massaquoi is a great third rusher. If you have him in that sort of the role that OC played in the Giants back, a couple of years ago when they were in the Super Bowl run, where he basically just comes on the field in passing situations, he's great in that role. But as an every down player, I don't see it. And I think other than that, and I think Hageman has the potential to develop into a sort of Red Bryant sort of disruptor up the middle on rundowns. But I don't necessarily see him being that every down dominant force that's a starter. Certainly not next year. Maybe 2016. Maybe that's the case, but I don't see that happening overnight next year. So I think with that defensive line, you can look at a situation, and with Peters being a free agent, with Jackson possibly being a post-June cut, with if we keep a 3-4, the next coach may say, Babineau, you've done great for us, but you're 33 and you're really a 4-3 guy. You might have 4 new starters or 3 new starters across that defensive line next year. And let me not forget about our boy Malachi Goodman. I think Malachi Goodman is a solid rotational player, but again, I don't think he's ready to step up and be that sort of every down defensive disruptor yet. Maybe he gets there, but I don't know if I would trust in that happening next year. So I think the defensive line definitely has to be the Falcons' offseason priority, if not in free agency, then in the draft.
And again, the only thing I disagree with there is I think Jonathan Massaquoi, in the right scheme with the right coach, is at minimum a second guy in that pass rush. I think he's at worst an Elvis Doomerville if you've got a Terrell Suggs type. I think that's his fit.
Okay.
I think he's that speed rusher when you've got that power rusher on the other side. And I think the thing is he's had his best pass rushing games when he's played the most snaps. He's one of those guys that, just like a running back who needs carries to get into a rhythm, a pass rusher needs that pitch count to get an idea of what the tackle's doing and figure out, what, this guy isn't taking well to my bull rush. Maybe I should use a counter move, or maybe I should do a speed rush move next time. Sometimes that's all you got to do.
Okay. All right.
So,
yeah, I'm not going to dispute it, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's it. Blake, people can find you on Twitter at Blake Murphy 7. Am I not mistaken? Yes, Blake Murphy 7. And do you have anything else you need to plug?
Basically, I'm just going to be on Twitter for a while. Happy to talk with anyone who's there. I'm not writing currently for any websites. Might be at some point in the future. Just kind of busy with school right now. I'm trying to get my degree. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, we appreciate it, man. Sharing your insights and talking to the a little bit. I got a toe on the Todd Bowles bandwagon now, so.
Yeah, yeah. Get that foot in the bandwagon there, and it'll be it's a good bandwagon to be on.
All right. Well, if they shut down the Falcons' offense this week, which they probably will, I'll probably put the whole foot on. So we'll see.
All right.
People can find Scott and I on Twitter. I'm at FalcFans. Scott is at Scott Karasik. Hit up the show's Twitter handle, Falcons PFC. Be sure to follow PF Central. You can find Scott's stuff on Bleacher Report. You can find my stuff on FalcFans.com. And be sure to send in those Falcons mailbag questions. Use the hashtag Falcons mailbag, and we'll be sure to get it. So that's this week's show. Good luck, Falcons.